Hi, thanks for joining me for another episode of First Chapter Friday. My name is Lucy, and today the book that I will be reading from is called The List of Things That Will Not Change by Rebecca Stead. This is a middle grade book. And I don't know if you are familiar with Rebecca Stead, if you've read some of her other books. If not, I highly recommend them. She's a great writer. She writes really good characters. Her stories are just different and fun and moving in unusual ways. This particular book is about a girl named B, whose parents get divorced when she's about 10, and they sit down with her and they present her with a green notebook in which they've started a list of things that will not change even though they're getting divorced, which are like, your mother loves you, your father loves you, we'll still be a family. And so B takes great comfort in this book, and she adds to her list when she finds other things in her life that will not change. And one of the most important things is we are still a family, but in a different way. So that is where the list of things that will not change comes from. The book starts with B telling us about her father's second wedding. So this is after her parents are divorced, and her father is about to get married to his boyfriend, Jesse, which B is very excited about. She loves Jesse, and even more exciting than that is that Jesse also has a daughter who's B's age, and B has wanted forever a sister. So she is so excited to be getting a sister. But in order to tell us the story about her dad's wedding and getting a sister, she has to really fill in a lot of the backstory, which is what a lot of this book is. So she goes back and forth between building up to her dad's wedding and things that happened a couple of years ago, things that still weigh heavily on her mind. B is a great character, and she is not perfect by any stretch, but she tries to be nice, and she suffers from a lot of anxiety. She worries about a lot of things. She suffers from eczema too, so she's itchy a lot of the time. And her face always conveys what she's thinking. She cannot hide what she's feeling with her facial expressions. This is something about herself that kind of bothers B. So this book gets into sort of like naming and identifying your feelings, when you're feeling happy, when you're feeling sad, how you show that, understanding why other people behave the way they do, and fostering friendships and creating new families. What B's story shows us is that friendships and family are not always easy, but the love that they provide and what you get from them is worth it. So that is sort of a general overview of the book. It's a great one. I highly recommend it, but I will go ahead and read. I'm actually going to read the first 2 chapters of this book because the first chapter is just about a page long. So this is the first 2 chapters of The List of Things That Will Not Change by Rebecca Stead. The Sound of Corn. Just last weekend, my dad told me a story that explained 1 or 2 things about his wedding day. Not his first wedding day, the second one. The story was about him and Uncle Frank when they were little. They grew up in Minnesota across from a cornfield where, every summer, the corn grew very quickly. Dad says the corn had no choice because summers are short in Minnesota. It was either grow fast or don't bother. Every year, Dad and Uncle Frank would stand together in the corn, listening to it grow. No one ever believed them, but they could hear the leaves squeaking, stretching for the sun. They both heard the corn growing, Dad said, and no one else did. You never told me that before, I said. I liked thinking of them standing in the corn like that. I didn't? Dad was flipping pancakes. We have this new pancake griddle that covers 2 stove burners, so now he can make 4 at once. It's great. Did you hold hands? Who? You and Uncle Frank in the corn, so you wouldn't lose each other. Dad snorted. No. Have you ever seen Uncle Frank holding hands with anyone? You'd probably never guess they're brothers. Uncle Frank is reddish white, and my dad has a ton of brown freckles that give him a year-round face tan. Dad is a talker, and Uncle Frank, isn't. Dad loves food, every kind of it. And Uncle Frank says if he could live on one hard-boiled egg a day, he would be happy. If you want to know what the sound of corn growing explains about my dad's second wedding day, I'll have to tell you a longer story about a lot of things that happened 2 years ago when I was 10. It's a story about me, but a different me, a person who doesn't exist anymore. I have seen Uncle Frank holding hands with someone exactly one time that I can remember. Angelica. The summer I turned 10, my cousin Angelica fell from the sleeping loft at our family's lake cabin. Uncle Frank says her head missed the wood stove by 4 inches. She hit the floor with a bad sound, a whoomp. Then we didn't hear anything. No crying, no yelling, nothing. Until finally, there was the sound of Angelica trying to breathe. Dad got to her first. Aunt S, Angelica's mom, called from her room. "What was that? Dan, what was that?" He answered, It's Angelica. She fell, but she's okay. She got the wind knocked out of her, but I think she's okay." From the loft, I saw Angelica sit up slowly. Dad was rubbing her back in circles. Uncle Frank and Aunt S came crashing in from their bedroom, and then Angelica started crying, these short, jagged cries. The next morning, Uncle Frank said that if her head had hit the wood stove, Angelica could have died. By that time, she looked normal. She was wearing her turquoise 2-piece bathing suit and chewing her eggs with her lips sealed tight. No bruises even. She landed on her back, Dad said, which is what knocked her wind out. That summer, my parents had been divorced for 2 years already, but I still thought about when Mom used to come to the lake cabin with us. I could picture her red bathing suit on the clothesline. I remembered which end of the table she sat at for dinner. I remembered her sitting on the dock with Aunt S talking. Mom and Dad told me about the divorce at a family meeting. I had just turned 8. We'd never had a family meeting before. I sat on the couch between them. They didn't look happy, and I suddenly got worried that something was wrong with our cat, Red. That they were going to tell me he was dying. A boy in my class that year had a cat who died. But that wasn't it. Dad put his arm around me and said that some big things were going to change. Mom squeezed my hand. Then Dad said they were getting divorced. Soon he was going to move out of our apartment into a different one. I said, "But I'm staying here, right?" I looked at Mom. Dad said I was going to have 2 homes and 2 rooms instead of 1. I was going to live in both places. I could think of only one person in my class whose parents were divorced, Carolyn Shattuck. Carolyn had a navy blue sweatshirt with one big pocket in front. Until the family meeting, I had wanted one just like it. I said, "What about Red?" Mom said Red would be staying with her, with us, you and me. You and me. That made me feel awful, because back then I couldn't think of Mom and me without Dad. Dad said, "Things are changing, Bee, but there's still a lot you can count on, okay? Things that won't ever change." This was when they gave me the green spiral notebook and the green pen. My favorite color is green. In the notebook, they had made a list. The list was called Things That Will Not Change. I started reading. Number 1, Mom loves you more than anything, always. Number 2, Dad loves you more than anything, always. I skipped to the end, uncapped the green pen, and wrote 7, Red will stay with me and Mom. I said, I want my rainbow to stay here too, over my bed. Dad painted that rainbow right on the wall when I was really little. Mom said, yes, of course, sweetie. Your rainbow will stay right where it is. I wrote that down too. Number 8. Dad moved into a different apartment a month later. I go back and forth between them. Here's how it works. Monday is a dad day. Tuesday is a mom day. Wednesday is a dad day. Thursday is a mom day. Friday is part of the weekend. The weekend is Friday and Saturday. The weekend alternates. Sunday is Sunday. Sunday is its own day. Sunday alternates. Before Dad moved out, I thought of the weekend as Saturday and Sunday. Now I think of the weekend as Friday and Saturday. And I think of Sunday as Sunday. Right after the family meeting, I found Red asleep in the laundry basket and carried him to my room, where I opened my new notebook. I looked at the list of things that will not change. My parents had written, 1, Mom loves you more than anything, always. 2, Dad loves you more than anything, always. 3, Mom and Dad love each other, but in a different way. 4, you will always have a home with each of us. 5, your homes will never be far apart. 6, we are still a family, but in a different way. After that, I carried the green spiral notebook everywhere. I asked a lot of questions. I used the green pen. Our first summer at the lake cabin without Mom, there were mom-shaped reminders everywhere, like her blue sari pieces and the chipped yellow bowl she always used for tomato salad. The mom reminders were all over the place, but I was the only one who saw them. That summer, Dad explained to everyone at the cabin, Uncle Frank and Aunt S and my cousins James, Angelica, and Jojo, that he is gay. I already knew. My parents had told me at the one and only family meeting when they gave me the notebook. Will you be gay forever now? I asked Dad at the meeting. Yes, he told me. He would always be attracted to some men the same way that some men were attracted to some women. It's the way he felt since he was little. I uncapped my green pen and wrote it down right away on the list of things that will not change. It's number 9. Dad is gay. After Dad explained about being gay to everyone at the lake cabin, he asked if anyone had questions. No one did. Then Dad and Uncle Frank walked down to the dock and sat with their feet in the water. I watched from the porch where I was sitting on the edge of Uncle Frank's favorite chair. After a while, they stood up and jumped in the lake. They were splashing each other like little kids, laughing. I remember being surprised because Uncle Frank never swims. He always says the water in that lake is too cold. Most of the time, he just sits on the porch, in his chair, in the sun. So you live with your mom now? My cousin James asked me that night in the sleeping loft. James is 4 years older than I am. He was 8 that first summer without Mom. I was 8 that first summer without Mom, so he was 12. I explained to him about the days of the week. When I was done, we got into our beds, and Angelica tickled my arm for a while. Usually I tickled her arm, and then she would say she was too tired to do mine. Right around then, James started calling me Ping Pong. He had really weird nicknames for his sisters. He called Angelica BD, which was for bottom drawer, because she'd once stepped into an open dresser drawer to reach something on a shelf and fallen over, cutting her lip. And James called Jojo Speaker, short for speakerphone, because when she was a baby, she used to cry if she heard Uncle Frank's voice but couldn't see him anywhere. The names were kind of mean, but I had secretly wanted a James nickname for a long time. I couldn't remember doing anything ping pong related that James might be making fun of me for, but I didn't care. I actually liked the name Ping Pong until Aunt S heard him down at our dock and told him to march himself up to the porch so they could have a chat. Aunt S, I don't mind it, I called after them, but she ignored me. You mean you like being a ping pong ball? Angelica said. Angelica is 1.5 years older than me. We were trying to teach Jojo, even though she's only 5, to play volleyball on the little beach where we kept the boats pulled up next to our dock. Now Angelica was tapping the dirty volleyball with the tips of her fingers. She had it trapped between a hip and an elbow. What? I felt my eyes narrowing. I hated it when I didn't understand something right away. You go back and forth, right? From your mom's to your dad's, like a ping pong ball. She smiled. I was on top of her in 3 steps. First, I yanked her ponytail, and then I smacked that ball off her hip down to the dirt. B! Aunt S shouted down from the porch. I guess she'd been yelling at James and watching over us at the same time. Angelica just stood there, smiling. I stomped to the water and floated on my back with my ears under the water so that I couldn't hear. Angelica was stuck waiting for me to get out because we were swim buddies. James didn't call me ping pong again or anything else. When my parents were together, 2 weeks at the lake with my cousins was never enough for me. After the divorce, it felt about a week too long. It felt too long the summer I was 8, when my cousin Jojo was finally old enough to stay up and play sorry with us after dinner. Green is Jojo's favorite color too, so I let her have my pieces, and I took Mom's blue ones. It felt too long the summer I was 9. That was the summer the chipped yellow bowl broke. I don't know how it happened. I just saw the pieces in the garbage. It felt especially too long the summer I was 10, the summer Angelica fell. When those 2 weeks were finally over, I was in the back seat of our car even before Rocco, our dog, could hurl himself in there. And Rocco loves the car. So that is the end of those first 2 chapters of the list of things that will not change. And as you can see from that, Bee also loves details. Every time she goes back to tell a little bit more of her story, she really has to fill in all the details, which is kind of a fun part of this book. And speaking of details, I think in the introduction, I said that she was 10 when her parents got divorced, and I realized she was 8 when her parents got divorced, but this story sort of takes place between the years of when she was 10 and when she was 12. And there were so many things about this book I loved, but I think that it has an underlying message that I really liked, which is that good days can also be difficult days, but it's the people that you spend those days with that make the difference. And if you have not read Rebecca Stead's other books, she has a book called When You Reach Me, a book called Liar and Spy, a book called Goodbye Stranger, and a good book called First Light. I would recommend any of those as well. She is a great writer and she has great stories. So I hope you try The List of Things That Will Not Change or one of Rebecca Stead's other books. Thanks for joining me.